All right, folks. In this video, I want to show you guys how to actually manufacture this little linkage. The idea is we'd be taking a piece of aluminum or steel, put it in the milling machine, and using the milling machine to precisely cut this part out. So in the last video, we actually designed this piece. Let's actually figure out how to manufacture that. I'm going to change my workspace from the design workspace to the manufacture workspace. There we go. Now, if you're doing this for the first time, you may have all these parts shown. It'll default to creating a manufacturer setup for all these parts. So let me go up to setup, and you'll notice that'll create like a stock material around all these parts. But that's not what I want. I just want to manufacture the little linkage. And so under your setup where it says model, click select. I'm going to click the little linkage, and you'll notice that actually changes my stock body so it just fits tightly to the linkage itself. And then if you need to, you can go in and hide all these other parts that we don't need. So I'm just doing that linkage 1. Go ahead and hide those pins as well. And let's look at how to actually manufacture this part. I'm gonna start with just like the stock, however the stock's defaults. That's fine. The only thing I am going to change is this little coordinate system, this X, Y, and Z axis. That's called the work coordinate system. We'll talk about that more in detail, as I mentioned, once we get into actually working with milling machines. But for right now, what we really need to know is that the Z-axis almost always corresponds to the up and down axis on standard milling machines. And so I want to reorient this so my Z-axis is going perpendicular to the wide surface of this object. That's going to be the easiest way to mill this thing out. And so I can actually go up to orientation. You see where it says model orientation. Ooh, not model orientation. We want to select our coordinate system. I just want to change the Z-axis. Let me go to select Z-axis and X plane. So I want my Z-axis to go up and down relative to this part. And you'll notice that corresponds, like that popped up this little default axis thing. The Z-axis is going to correspond to this red axis here. And you see that moves my work coordinate system so that the Z-axis is pointing up. All right, let me align my X-axis with this blue axis. I'm going to actually move this origin point from the center to that corner. And let me just flip my X-axis. You don't have to do that, but in terms of actually like manufacturing this part, that might be an easier point to actually get the machine set up and actually cut this out, which we don't have to worry about now for just the simulation. But when we get into actually machining parts, that is something we'll need to take into account. All right, that's enough for the setup. Now, if I look at this part, like I've got my stock material, it's always going to be nominally bigger than the actual part itself. And so we'll typically start something like this off with a facing toolpath. So I'm going to go up here to the tool, select face. Let me select a different tool. We're talking about milling. All my tools are in inches. I'm going to select whatever the default face mill is. So we got a 2-inch face mill. We'll leave all those settings at their default settings for now. They're the kind of things we want to fine tune to like the machine we're using and make sure are optimal for whatever our settings on our milling machine are. But for right now, that we'll go through and set up a facing toolpath. So that'll cut down the stock material to the top of the actual model that we're trying to cut out. Now to cut out this model, you can see I kind of got 2 distinct things. I've got these little circular holes that need to be cut out. And then I've got the profile around the outside that I want to cut out from this model as well. So I'm going to, let's do an adaptive clearing. I'm going to try and like create a pocket in these holes. And so adaptive clearing should clear out those holes. I'm going to need a much smaller cutting tool, though, to actually do that. And so I think what I've chosen is a little 16th inch, might even be too small. Let me grab, Yeah, it's probably a little small. Maybe an 1/8 inch would be better. But I want to make sure that that tool that I'm using will actually fit inside the hole. I think if you pick a 1/4 inch, it's going to be a little too big to actually cut out that hole. So either an 1/8 of an inch or 1/16 inch should work fine. Oh, let me actually select a pocket. If you go over to geometry, I'm just going to select these 2 circles, and it'll default to pocketing inside those circles, to clearing out material inside those circles. Keep the default settings the same for now, and you'll see, how it's actually cutting out those interior points. One more toolpath to finish cutting out this. I'm going to do a 2D contour. Let me select a slightly bigger bit. Let me use a 1/4 inch end mill. And again, geometry, I want to cut out that face. Select the face, it'll default to the outside contour, and you can see the line that the machine's going to cut this piece out. Of course, it's always a good idea to simulate stuff just to get an idea of what this looks like, but it's pretty straightforward. You can see the cuts that this tool is going to make to cut through the part. Now, looking at this, this thing did not actually cut through my material. Good thing I simulated it. So I need to go back into my contour and fix something. So let me double click contour. Thing I need to fix is in heights. You'll notice this is where we can specify like how deep we want to cut for like different parts that we're trying to cut. Things like clearance height. That's make sure I can move my machine up and not hit any part of my model. Feed height, top height. We obviously want to start at the top of the stock to cut this out. Unless we faced it, we could probably start at the top of the material. But I want to make sure I'm cutting through the material. I'm going to cut all the way to the stock bottom. So instead of just cutting to the top of the the top of the model, we'll cut to the bottom of the stock, and that'll make sure we'll go all the way through. In practice, if we're actually setting this up, we might create a small offset, so we leave a little bit of material around the edge to hold things down. But for our purposes, this will give us a good simulation. You can see how that's actually changed that model, and we're actually cutting all the way through the material. Let's see. All right, so there's my facing toolpath. Let's cut in the holes. It looks all right. Our facing toolpath looked good, so I think that is enough to actually cut this part out. So give that a shot. If you need help, of course, you're welcome to let me know in class. Your design will probably look different. This is just one way of doing this. There's always more than one way of doing things in Fusion 360, but hopefully that will get you started with actually machining your part.